Story number 1. Shadows of the Resurrection Train. I still wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, the echoes of that fateful journey reverberating through my dreams like the relentless whistle of a ghostly locomotive. It's been decades since the resurrection train vanished into the Siberian darkness. Yet the memories haunt me with the same intensity as the frigid winds that swept through the Trans-Siberian tunnels that cold winter night. Tonight, as I sit alone in my dimly lit study, the shadows cast by the flickering lamp dance eerily on the walls, and I can almost hear the distant cries of those lost souls, carried by the restless spirits that linger in the forgotten corridors of history. I was a young railway engineer, full of ambition and pride, assigned to oversee the maintenance of one of Russia's most prestigious routes, the Trans-Siberian Railway, the Resurrection Train, a name that echoed both reverence and superstition, was a midnight express renowned for its punctuality and comfort, a lifeline connecting Moscow to the vast expanse of Siberia. On a bitterly cold night in the early 1980s, I embarked on a journey that would forever alter my perception of reality and the thin veil separating the living from the dead. The night was unforgiving, the air thick with snowflakes that clung to my coat like icy fingers. The train departed Moscow's Grand Station with a promise of speed and safety, its engines roaring to life as we sped into the darkness. I settled into my compartment, the hum of the engines a comforting lullaby that lulled me into a false sense of security. The passengers, a mix of businessmen, families, and solitary travelers, occupied their seats with weary smiles and tired eyes, unaware of the impending nightmare. As we traversed the vast Siberian wilderness, the landscape transformed into a monochrome canvas of snow-covered trees and endless plains. The train sliced through the night with unwavering determination, the tracks gleaming under the pale moonlight. But as we approached the remote stretch of the route, nestled between towering mountains and dense forests, an unnatural stillness descended upon us. The usual sounds of the night, crickets chirping, owls hooting, were conspicuously absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on the very soul of the train. It was just past midnight when we entered the tunnel, a colossal structure carved into the heart of the mountain. The air inside was thick with anticipation, the darkness swallowing the train whole as we hurtled through the subterranean passage. The tunnel seemed endless, the only light coming from the dimly lit lamps that flickered ominously above. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of excitement and unease tightening my grip on the control panel. Suddenly, without warning, the train lurched violently, the engines sputtering and whining as if struggling against an unseen force. The lights flickered and dimmed, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the compartment walls. Panic surged through me as the realization dawned. Something was terribly wrong. The train had lost power, grinding to a halt in the oppressive darkness of the tunnel. I sprang from my seat, my mind racing to diagnose the issue. The other engineers and conductors moved frantically through the carriages, their faces pale with fear. The passengers, sensing the growing tension, began to murmur anxiously, their whispers filling the compartment with a sense of impending doom. As I made my way to the engine room, the air grew colder, the temperature dropping to an unbearable chill that seeped into my bones. Entering the engine room, I was met with chaos. The control panels were sparking, wires dangling from the ceiling like tendrils of an unknown beast. Smoke filled the air, stinging my eyes and making it difficult to breathe. I struggled to regain control, my hands trembling as I worked to restore power. But the instruments refused to respond, the train seemingly possessed by an otherworldly force. It was then that I heard it, a faint, mournful wailing that echoed through the tunnels, growing louder with each passing second. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, a haunting melody of sorrow and despair that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the tunnel. My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. The resurrection train was no ordinary train. It was a vessel for lost souls, trapped between worlds, their restless spirits yearning for release. Desperation drove me to continue my efforts. But the resistance was overwhelming. The train groaned and shuddered, the wailing intensifying into a cacophony of anguished cries that filled my mind with terror. Shadows danced in the corners of the engine room, their forms shifting and contorting into grotesque shapes that defied logic. I could feel their presence, their sorrowful energy pressing down on me, threatening to consume my very essence. As the minutes dragged on, the situation grew dire. The passengers' anxiety transformed into sheer panic, their fears manifesting in desperate attempts to flee the train. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors, mingling with the relentless wailing and the creaking of the metal carriages. Faces appeared in the shadows, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams, their anguish palpable in the frigid air. In a final, futile effort to save the train, I managed to reroute the power, the engines roaring back to life with a force that sent tremors through the tunnel. The train began to move again, but the path was no longer clear. The tunnel had transformed into a labyrinth of darkness and sorrow, the tracks twisting and turning in impossible directions as the spirits of the lost souls clung desperately to the vessel that held them captive. The resurrection train hurtled through the tunnel with a speed that defied reason, the scenery outside a blur of darkness and icy winds. The whispers of the lost souls filled the compartment, their voices intertwining with the howling wind, creating a symphony of torment that echoed through the steel walls. I clung to the control panel, my mind fraying under the relentless pressure of fear and despair. Suddenly, the train emerged from the tunnel into the bleak Siberian night, the cold wind biting at my face as we sped through the desolate landscape. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow on the snow-covered ground as if watching our every move. The passengers, now a mix of terror and resignation, sat huddled together, their eyes darting nervously towards the windows, anticipating the next horror to unfold. But as we continued our journey, the path ahead remained shrouded in darkness, the tracks disappearing into the vast expanse of the frozen wilderness. The resurrection train had become a cursed vessel, forever bound to the restless spirits that haunted its corridors, their sorrowful whispers a constant reminder of the thin line between life and death. I realized then that there was no escape, no way to break the cycle of torment that had claimed so many lives. The train was a beacon for lost souls, a bridge between the living and the dead, its engines forever fueled by the anguish and despair of those trapped within. And as the train hurtled through the endless night, I could feel their presence, their silent screams echoing through my very soul, a chilling reminder that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. Years have passed since that harrowing night, but the memories of the resurrection train remain etched into my very being. On cold, silent nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the whispers of those lost souls, calling out from the depths of the Siberian wilderness. Their voices blend with the rustling leaves and the distant howl of wolves, a haunting symphony that never truly fades. I often find myself staring into the darkness, wondering if the spirits of the resurrection train have found peace or remain trapped in their eternal vigil. The train stands as a monument to their suffering, its engines forever roaring with the restless energy of lost souls, its tracks a never-ending path through the shadows of the unknown. The symbols and markings we discovered in the engine room still haunt my dreams, a reminder of the thin line between curiosity and hubris, between discovery and desecration. In sharing this story, I hope to honor the memory of those who vanished without a trace, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the corridors of time. Let it serve as a cautionary tale to those who dare to traverse the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our control. For in the heart of the storm, amidst the swirling winds and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully understood or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the night is thick with silence, I remember the shadows of the resurrection train. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal. and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. The resurrection train may remain a haunting chapter in history, but its legacy endures. A chilling reminder of the night when humanity's quest for connection met the unforgiving wrath of the unknown, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. Story number 2. Whispers at Beguncador Station. I still wake up in the dead of night, my sheets tangled around me like the overgrown vines that now claim the abandoned Beguncador Station. The memory of that night in 1960 haunts me, lingering like the mist that envelopes the ruins every evening. Tonight, as I sit alone in my study, the shadows cast by the flickering lamp dance ominously on the walls, and I can almost hear the whispers of Beguncador, carried by the restless winds that sweep through the forgotten tracks. I was a young journalist, eager to uncover stories that lay hidden in the corners of the world. The tales of Beguncador, a small train station nestled deep within the Indian countryside, had always intrigued me. Stories of strange accidents, eerie apparitions, and the eventual abandonment of the station painted a picture of a place cursed by tragedy and sorrow. Determined to get to the heart of the mystery, I embarked on a journey that would forever change my perception of reality. The summer of 2018 was hot and humid, the perfect weather for exploring the forgotten corners of the country. I arrived in the nearest town, a sleepy village that seemed untouched by time, where the locals spoke in hushed tones about the haunted station. Their eyes darted nervously whenever the subject arose, and their reluctance to share details only fueled my curiosity. Armed with a notebook, camera, and an unquenchable thirst for the truth, I made my way to Beguncador. The journey was arduous, winding through dense forests and overgrown paths that nature had reclaimed with fierce determination. As I approached the station, the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the remnants of a once bustling hub now silent and forsaken. Beguncador Station stood as a ghostly monument to a bygone era. The platform, overgrown with weeds, stretched out into the darkness, the tracks disappearing into the shadows like veins leading to an unknown heart. The station building, its walls cracked and windows shattered, loomed overhead, a hollow shell of its former self. Graffiti and faded signs clung to the remnants of its facade, whispering tales of lost hope and forgotten lives. I set up my equipment, the silence around me oppressive and thick with anticipation. The stories I had heard spoke of a woman in white, a ghostly apparition seen running across the tracks on stormy nights. They said her presence was a harbinger of impending doom, her sorrowful cries echoing through the darkness, a reminder of lives lost and dreams shattered. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, the darkness growing deeper and more foreboding. I decided to stay overnight, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural phenomena that Beguncador was rumored to harbor. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the voices of the lost. I sat on the platform, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sound the occasional drip of water from a leaky roof and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. Just as I was beginning to lose hope, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper reached my ears. I froze, straining to listen as the sound grew clearer. A woman's voice, filled with anguish and despair. "Help me!" My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the sound, my flashlight beam dancing across the platform. There, at the far end, stood a figure draped in white, her form ethereal and translucent. Her eyes, hollow and sorrowful, met mine, and I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness wash over me. "Why are you here?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, only extended her hand towards me, her fingers trailing into the darkness. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I took a hesitant step forward. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the chill as the figure began to fade, her form dissolving into the night like mist. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shook violently. The the sound of screeching metal filling the air as the wind howled with newfound fury. The platform seemed to warp and twist, shadows lengthening and contorting into grotesque shapes. Panic surged through me as I realized the true nature of Beguncador. It wasn't just a haunted station, but a gateway to a realm where the lost souls of the past were trapped, their suffering echoing through the corridors of time. Desperate to escape, I ran towards the station building, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The doors swung open with a force that sent me stumbling inside, the darkness within the building alive with unseen entities. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam piercing the inky blackness, revealing a maze of broken furniture and remnants of lives abruptly interrupted. As I navigated the labyrinthine interior, the temperature plummeted further, my fingers numb from the cold. The whispers morphed into wails, the cries of countless souls trapped within these walls. Faces appeared in the shadows, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams, their anguish palpable. I could feel their pain, their desperation to break free from the eternal night that held them captive. In the heart of the station, I found herself, a woman in white, her form more defined yet still ethereal. Her eyes bore into mine, filled with an eternal sorrow that transcended time. "You must help us," she pleaded, her voice echoing through the empty halls. "Find peace for us, and you will find peace for yourself." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out to her, the connection between us immediate and profound. The room around us began to shimmer, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms dissolving. Visions flashed before me, memories of that tragic night in 1960, the chaos and fear, the lives lost to an unforgiving world. I understood then that Beguncador was more than just a haunted station. It was a place of immense sorrow, a beacon for those seeking redemption and closure. With newfound determination, I vowed to honor their memories, to uncover the truth behind the accidents and bring peace to the restless souls of Beguncador. As dawn broke, the darkness lifted, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the broken windows, bathing the station in a warm, golden light. The spirits began to fade, their whispers softening into a gentle lullaby that spoke of hope and release. I left Beguncador that morning, the weight of their stories heavy on my shoulders but a sense of fulfillment in my heart. The station stood silent once more, the shadows no longer dancing with malevolent intent but instead resting peacefully in the embrace of the morning light. Years have passed since that transformative journey, but the memories of Beguncador remain etched into my very being. On cold, silent nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear their whispers, calling out from the depths of the forgotten station. Their voices blend with the rustling leaves and the distant cries of nocturnal creatures, a haunting symphony that never truly fades. I often find myself returning to my study, surrounded by relics and notes from that fateful expedition, trying to piece together the fragments of a story that defies comprehension. Beguncador serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of memory, a testament to the souls who continue to seek peace in the afterlife. In sharing this story, I hope to honor those who were lost, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the corridors of time. Let it serve as a cautionary tale to those who dare to venture into the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our understanding. For in the heart of Beguncador, amidst the swirling shadows and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully understood or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the night is thick with silence, I remember the whispers at Beguncador Station. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. Beguncador may remain a place of beauty and mystery, but its legacy endures, a chilling reminder of the night when humanity's quest for sanctuary met the unforgiving wrath of the unknown, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. Story number 3. Shadows on the Sanio line. I still wake up drenched in sweat, the memory of that frigid winter night in 2003 clawing at my subconscious like icy fingers. It's been over 2 decades since I boarded the Sanayo line from Osaka to Hiroshima. Yet the haunting images of that disappearance linger as vividly as the shadows that danced in the dimly lit corridors of my mind. Tonight, as I sit alone in my study, the flickering lamp casts long, wavering shadows on the walls, and I can almost hear the whispers of that night, carried by the cold winds that sweep through the remnants of a forgotten past. I was an ordinary commuter, a young professional navigating the bustling streets of Osaka, seeking solace in the rhythmic clatter of the train tracks. The Sanayo line was my lifeline, a connection between the vibrant chaos of the city and the serene promise of Hiroshima. On that winter night in January 2003, I was among the hundreds of passengers seeking refuge from the biting cold, unaware that our journey would spiral into a nightmare that defied explanation. The train was packed, the air thick with the scent of anticipation and the hum of subdued conversations. I settled into my seat by the window, the view of snow-covered landscapes a stark contrast to the warmth of the carriage. The conductor's announcements were routine, the train moving steadily through the night, slicing through the darkness with unwavering precision. As we approached a remote stretch of the route, nestled deep within the mountainous terrains, the temperature outside plummeted sharply. The landscape transformed into a desolate expanse of white, the trees heavy with snow, their branches bent under the weight. A storm was brewing, the wind howling with a ferocity that seemed almost sentient, as if the very elements were conspiring against us. It was around midnight when the train came to an abrupt halt, the sudden stop jolting us from our reverie. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced across the faces of the passengers. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone edged with unease. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." Panic began to ripple through the carriage as the realization set in. We were stranded in the heart of a blizzard, miles away from the nearest station, with no immediate sign of rescue. The temperature inside the train dropped rapidly, the cold seeping through the walls and making the air thick and suffocating. Passengers huddled together, seeking warmth and comfort amidst the growing uncertainty. It was then that I noticed him, a solitary figure standing near the rear of the carriage, his coat pulled tightly around him, eyes fixed on the window as if searching for something beyond the storm. His presence was unnerving, a silent sentinel amidst the chaos, his gaze empty and distant. As the hours dragged on, the atmosphere grew heavier, the whispers of fear and desperation mingling with the relentless howl of the wind outside. Around 2 in the morning, the unthinkable happened. The lights in the second carriage flickered and dimmed, casting the entire compartment into near darkness. A sense of foreboding settled over me as I watched the solitary passenger step out of his seat, the door sliding open with a creak that echoed through the silent train. Without a word, he moved towards the window, his footsteps slow and deliberate, as if entranced by an unseen force. Curiosity piqued. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. The corridor was dimly lit, the shadows stretching long and menacing. As I approached the door, I caught a glimpse of something beyond the glass, a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The passenger paused, his hand reaching out towards the void, as if beckoned by an invisible presence. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a force that sent me stumbling back, the sound reverberating through the empty carriage. I rushed back to my seat, trying to calm my racing heart, but the fear had already taken root. The whispers grew louder, the voices of the lost and desperate intertwining with the howling storm outside. "Leave, now," they seemed to chant, their words a haunting lullaby that filled the darkness with dread. Minutes turned into hours as the train remained immobilized, the storm raging with an intensity that mirrored the turmoil within us. The solitary passenger never returned, his disappearance as abrupt and inexplicable as his initial departure. Security cameras captured his final moments, the step into the darkness, the fading silhouette swallowed by the void, but offered no explanation, only deepening the mystery that enveloped the Sanayo line. As dawn broke, the storm began to abate, the winds dying down to a mournful whisper. Rescue teams arrived, their presence a beacon of hope amidst the lingering shadows of the night. The train was towed back to the nearest station, the passengers emerging from their compartments, their faces etched with fear and confusion. The solitary passenger was never found, his fate sealed by the enigmatic forces that had claimed him in the heart of the storm. Years have passed since that harrowing night, but the memory of the Sanayo Line incident remains a haunting specter in my mind. On cold, silent nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the whispers of that night, the voices of the lost echoing through the corridors of my consciousness. The image of the solitary passenger, his figure swallowed by the void, lingers like a ghostly apparition, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. I often find myself staring out the window, the city lights of Osaka a stark contrast to the desolate landscapes of that winter night. The Sanayo Line continues to run, a lifeline for countless passengers, unaware of the dark secrets that lie hidden beneath its steel tracks. But I know better. I carry the memory of that night with me, a tale of mystery and horror that defies rational explanation. In sharing this story, I hope to honor the memory of those who were lost, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the shadows of the Sanayo Line. Let it be a cautionary tale to those who dare to journey through the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our control. For in the heart of the storm, amidst the swirling winds and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully understood or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the night is thick with silence, I remember the shadows on the Sanayo Line. I remember the face of the lost passenger, his eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. The Sanayo Line may continue its journey through the annals of history, but its legacy endures, a chilling reminder of the night when humanity's quest for connection met the unforgiving wrath of the unknown, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. Story number 4. Whispers of the St. Louis. I still wake up in the dead of night, the echo of distant screams reverberating through my dreams like the restless spirits that haunt the darkened corridors of history. It's been decades since I first boarded the St. Louis, yet the memories of that tragic voyage remain as vivid and haunting as the shadows that dance in the corners of my room. Tonight, as I sit alone in my dimly lit study, the flickering candlelight casts long, wavering shadows on the walls, and I can almost hear the whispers of those lost souls, carried by the cold winds that sweep through the remnants of a forgotten past. I was a young historian, passionate about uncovering the stories that time had tried to bury. The tale of the St. Louis, a ship laden with hundreds of Jewish refugees fleeing the horrors of Nazi Germany, had always intrigued me. Its refusal of entry at ports in Cuba, the United States, and Canada, and the subsequent tragic fate of its passengers, were shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Determined to shed light on this dark chapter, I embarked on a journey that would lead me to confront the very essence of human suffering and the supernatural forces that lingered long after the physical world had moved on. In the fall of 1995, I traveled to Havana, Cuba, the first port of refusal for the St. Louis. The city was a blend of vibrant colors and deep-seated histories, a place where the past and present intertwined in a delicate dance. I met with local historians and survivors' families, piecing together fragmented accounts of that fateful journey. The stories were consistent: fear, desperation, and the crushing weight of being denied sanctuary. But what truly fascinated me were the accounts of inexplicable phenomena experienced by those who had ventured to explore the shipwreck years later. Undeterred by skepticism, I arranged a dive to the location where the St. Louis was last seen. The Atlantic Ocean, vast and unforgiving, was a cold and silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded decades earlier. As our submersible descended into the abyss, the water grew colder, the darkness deeper, until finally, the ghostly silhouette of the St. Louis emerged from the blackness. The ship lay broken and scattered on the ocean floor, a haunting monument to lost hope and unfulfilled dreams. We carefully documented the wreckage, capturing images of the shattered decks and scattered belongings. Personal items like worn shoes, tattered clothing, and tarnished jewelry lay forgotten, remnants of lives abruptly interrupted. As we explored further, an overwhelming sense of melancholy settled over me, the weight of countless untold stories pressing down on my very soul. That night, back in Havana, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the whispers of the ocean's depths echoed through my mind. I decided to spend a few days visiting the last known locations of the St. Louis, hoping to find more clues. It was during these visits that the supernatural elements began to unveil themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the harbor, I felt a sudden chill wash over me. The air grew heavy, and the distant cries of seagulls were replaced by soft, mournful whispers. I followed the sound to an old, abandoned warehouse near the docks, the very place where the St. Louis had been held before being turned away. Inside, the darkness was palpable, broken only by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through broken windows. As I stepped deeper into the building, the temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the icy air. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, voices calling out names, pleading for help. I felt an invisible presence watching me, the weight of countless lost souls pressing down on me. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls, revealing glimpses of figures standing just out of sight. Suddenly, the room seemed to come alive with the ghosts of the past, apparitions of men and women, their faces etched with fear and sorrow, peered around me. They moved silently, their eyes hollow and pleading, their hands reaching out as if trying to grasp something beyond their ethereal forms. One figure, a young woman with tear-streaked cheeks, stepped forward, her voice a haunting whisper. "Why did you leave us?" Tears welled in my eyes as I struggled to respond, the enormity of their suffering overwhelming me. "I'm here to remember you, to tell your story," I whispered back, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers that filled the room. Her expression softened, and she reached out a translucent hand towards me. "Don't forget us," she implored, her voice breaking with emotion. "Remember our pain, our loss. Let our voices be heard." As quickly as they had appeared, the apparitions faded into the shadows, their cries lingering in the cold air. I stood there, shaken to my core, the weight of their sorrow etched into my very being. It was a chilling reminder that some tragedies leave more than just physical scars. They leave invisible wounds that time cannot heal. Determined to honor their memory, I returned to my research with renewed vigor. I delved deeper into the archives, uncovering personal diaries, letters, and testimonies that painted a vivid picture of the lives lost on the St. Louis. Each document was a testament to the resilience and hope of those who had dared to dream of a better future, only to be met with unimaginable despair. One night, as I pored over the latest findings, the whispers returned, more urgent and insistent than ever. "Remember us? Don't let us fade." The voices echoed through the room, their sorrowful pleas intertwining with the rustling of the pages I was studying. I felt a presence beside me, a cold hand gently placing itself on my shoulder. I turned, expecting to see another lost soul. But the room was empty, save for the lingering shadows that danced in the flickering candlelight. Realizing the supernatural forces at play, I knew that the story of the St. Louis was not just a historical event. It was a haunting legacy that demanded to be told. The spirits of those lost aboard the ship sought recognition, their voices a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human suffering. Years have passed since that haunting encounter, but the memories of the St. Louis and its lost souls remain etched into my very being. On cold, silent nights, When the wind howls just right, I can still hear their whispers, calling out from the depths of the ocean and the shadows of forgotten warehouses. Their voices blend with the rustling leaves and the distant cries of seagulls, a haunting symphony that never truly fades. I often find myself standing at the edge of the harbor, staring out into the vast expanse of the Atlantic, wondering if the souls of the St. Louis have found peace or remain trapped in their eternal vigil. The ship's wreckage lies silent beneath the waves, a ghostly reminder of the lives lost and the mysteries that still linger. The whispers of the lost souls continue to guide me, their stories a testament to the enduring power of memory and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to seek a better life. In sharing this story, I hope to honor the memory of the St. Louis's passengers, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the corridors of time. Let it serve as a reminder that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. The St. Louis may remain a haunting chapter in history, but its legacy endures, a chilling reminder of the night when humanity's quest for salvation met the unforgiving wrath of fate, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. And so, when the winds howl and the waves crash against the shore, I remember the whispers of the St. Louis. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow. And I understand that some tragedies leave marks not just on the land, but on the soul itself. The St. Louis may lie silent beneath the waves, but its legacy endures, a haunting reminder of the night when hope met despair, and the spirits of the lost continue to seek their place in the annals of history. Story number 5. Shadows on Carriage 740. I still wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, the echoes of that fateful journey replaying in my mind like a relentless nightmare. It's been decades since I traveled on Train 740 from Haiphong to Hanoi, yet the memories of that eerie night remain as vivid and haunting as the shadows that danced in the dimly lit second carriage. Tonight, as I sit alone in my study, the flickering candlelight casts long, wavering shadows on the walls, and I can almost hear the whispers of that night, carried by the restless winds that howl outside my window. I was a young journalist, eager to capture the pulse of Vietnam's bustling cities and the stories that lingered in the quiet corners. The night train was a lifeline, a thread connecting the vibrant chaos of Hanoi with the industrious spirit of Haiphong. Train 740 was notorious for its punctuality and comfort, a favored route for late-night travelers seeking solace in the rhythmic clatter of the tracks. But on that cold October night in 1995, Train 740 became the setting for a mystery that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The journey began like any other, the train's steady motion a comforting presence as it sliced through the darkness. I settled into my seat in the first-class carriage, the soft hum of conversation and the occasional laugh creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. The second carriage, however, was where the true story unfolded, a place I never intended to witness firsthand but found myself drawn to by a mix of curiosity and an inexplicable sense of foreboding. Around midnight, as the train sliced through the dense forests that bordered the tracks, an unsettling stillness settled over the second carriage. The air grew inexplicably colder, the lights flickering intermittently, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I glanced toward the second carriage, noticing that it was unusually quiet, the soft murmur of passengers replaced by an oppressive silence. Driven by a journalist's instinct, I decided to investigate. Excusing myself from my seat, I made my way down the narrow aisle, the faint scent of damp wool and aged leather filling my senses. As I approached the door to the second carriage, a chill ran down my spine. The door slid open with a creak, revealing a dimly lit compartment that felt colder than the rest of the train. The seats were neatly arranged, untouched and pristine, yet there was an undeniable sense of abandonment. I stepped inside, the temperature dropping further as I crossed the threshold. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness, illuminating empty seats and silent passengers. It was as if time had stood still within those walls, I moved cautiously, the soft sound of my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. That's when I felt it, a presence, subtle yet unmistakable, watching me from the shadows. A shiver ran through me as I turned my flashlight towards the source, only to find nothing but the empty seats and the oppressive darkness. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the cold and the isolation of the night. But as I continued to explore, the sense of being watched intensified, the air thick with an unspoken dread. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the carriage, a voice barely audible over the distant hum of the train. "Leave, now." The words sent a jolt of fear through my body, my heart pounding in my chest. I spun around, flashlight scanning the empty rows. But there was no one there, only the lingering shadows and the cold, unyielding darkness. Determined to uncover the truth, I pressed on, my footsteps growing more tentative with each passing moment. As I reached the far end of the carriage, I noticed something odd, a chair slightly pulled out from its row, as if someone had been there moments before. My pulse quickened as I approached, the flashlight beam revealing a single, empty seat. The whispers returned, louder this time, their urgency palpable in the frigid air. "Leave, now." I tried to rationalize the experience, telling myself it was my imagination playing tricks in the cold night. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The second carriage felt alive with unseen eyes and restless spirits, their presence a constant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. As I turned to leave, the temperature plummeted further, my breath visible in the icy air. The doors to the carriage slammed shut with a force that rattled the entire compartment, trapping me inside. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the doors, calling out for help, but only my own desperate cries echoed back. In the darkness, the whispers grew into a cacophony of sorrow and rage, the voices intertwining into a haunting symphony that filled my mind with terror. Shadows coalesced into indistinct forms, their eyes hollow and accusing, their presence suffocating. I felt an invisible force pressing down on me, the weight of countless souls bearing down on my very being. Desperation drove me to search for an exit, but every door seemed to lead deeper into the labyrinthine darkness of the carriage. The whispers now formed coherent words, their voices blending into a single, mournful plea. "Leave, before it's too late." Exhausted and broken, I sank to the floor, the cold numbing my limbs and clouding my thoughts. The apparitions loomed closer, their faces twisted in eternal sorrow, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness that pierced my soul. "Why do you stay?" one of them whispered, the sound echoing in the depths of my mind. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the true horror of Train 740. It wasn't just a train lost in time, but a vessel for restless spirits, forever trapped in an eternal night, yearning for release. Their tragic fate mirrored the mystery that had brought me here, binding us together in a shared nightmare that defied comprehension. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, I reached out towards the apparitions, my hand passing through them like mist. A surge of energy pulsed through the carriage, the shadows dissipating as the whispers faded into the distance. The doors to the carriage swung open abruptly, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the train continued its journey through the night. I stumbled out of the second carriage, the warmth of the first-class compartment a stark contrast to the cold dread that had enveloped me. My heart raced as I made my way back to my seat, the experience leaving me shaken to my core. The rest of the journey passed in a blur, the once comforting rhythm of the train now a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within its walls. When we finally arrived in Hanoi, I stepped off the train with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The city lights welcomed me, a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of that unforgettable night. But as I looked back towards the platform, the second carriage seemed to shimmer and fade, its presence a ghostly reminder of the souls trapped on Train 740. Years have passed since that harrowing journey, but the memories remain etched into my very being. On cold, silent nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the whispers of those lost souls, calling out from the depths of the second carriage. Their voices blend with the rustling leaves and the distant hum of the city, a haunting symphony that never truly fades. I often find myself staring into the darkness, wondering if the spirits of Train 740 have found peace or remain trapped in their eternal vigil. The train stands as a monument to their suffering, its silver exterior forever gleaming under the ghostly lights of the subway. The shadows of the second carriage continue to dance in my dreams, their faces twisted in eternal sorrow, their voices a reminder of the thin line between reality and nightmare, hope and despair. In sharing this story, I hope to honor those who vanished without a trace, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the corridors of time. Let it serve as a cautionary tale to those who dare to tread the paths of the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our control. For in the heart of the night, amidst the swirling shadows and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully understood or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the night is thick with silence, I remember the shadows on carriage 740. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. Train 740 may run its course through the annals of history, but its legacy endures, a chilling reminder of the night when humanity's curiosity met the unforgiving wrath of the unknown, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. Story number 6. Shadows on Silver Pylon. I still wake up in the dead of night, the remnants of a haunting dream lingering like the chill that seeps through my bones. It's been years since that eerie encounter with Silver Pylon, the elusive silver train of Stockholm. Yet the memories remain as vivid and unsettling as the darkness that enveloped me that fateful night. Tonight, as I sit alone in my dimly lit study, the shadows cast by the flickering lamp dance on the walls, and I can almost hear the distant echoes of that ghostly locomotive, its presence a lingering specter in the heart of the city. I was a skeptic by nature, a man grounded in the tangible and dismissive of the supernatural. As a young journalist eager to make my mark, I sought stories that would captivate the public's imagination. The legend of Silver Pylon, a train that supposedly roamed the Stockholm subway system at night without a driver or passengers, intrigued me. Reports of sightings were sporadic, often dismissed as urban myths or the product of overactive imaginations. Yet, something about the mystery called to me, a puzzle begging to be unraveled. It was a chilly October evening when I decided to investigate the phenomenon firsthand. Armed with a notebook, camera, and a healthy dose of skepticism, I made my way to the Globen station, one of the primary hubs where Silver Pylon was rumored to appear. The station was deserted, the usual bustle of commuters replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on the cavernous space. As midnight approached, I settled into a corner of the platform, my eyes fixed on the tracks that stretched into the darkness. Hours passed with no sign of the enigmatic train, the silence only broken by the distant drip of water from a leaky pipe. Just as I began to question the validity of the tales, a subtle shift in the air caught my attention, a faint vibration beneath my feet, the low hum of an engine barely audible over the stillness. I glanced around, half expecting to see another late-night wanderer sharing my curiosity. Instead, the platform remained empty, the only movement the gentle sway of the overhead lights. My heart raced as the vibration intensified, growing into a palpable force that seemed to resonate through the very core of the station. The temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the sudden cold, and an unshakable feeling of dread settled over me. Then, as if materializing from the shadows themselves, Silver Pylon appeared. The train was a sleek, silver monolith, its exterior gleaming under the station's dim lights. Unlike the other subway trains, it lacked the usual markings and advertisements, its windows dark and opaque. No one was at the helm, no conductor in sight, just an empty vessel gliding silently along the tracks. I watched in a mixture of awe and terror as Silverpylon approached the platform, his presence both mesmerizing and menacing. The air around it seemed to shimmer, distorting the space with an otherworldly energy. The train stopped with an abruptness that sent a shiver down my spine, its doors sliding open without a sound. An oppressive silence enveloped the platform, the atmosphere thick with an unspoken warning. Against my better judgment, curiosity propelled me forward. I stepped onto the platform, the gap between the train and the edge of the platform narrowing with each hesitant step. As I reached the threshold, a wave of cold washed over me, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something inexplicably bitter. The doors closed behind me with a finality that resonated deep within my soul. Inside, the carriage was pitch black, the only light emanating from the faint glow of emergency lanterns that cast long, wavering shadows across the seats. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, filled with an oppressive stillness that pressed down on me from all sides. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam piercing the darkness, revealing rows of empty seats that seemed to stretch into infinity. As I moved down the aisle, the silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of my own footsteps echoing through the carriage. The train seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, the walls vibrating with a low, resonant hum that thrummed through my very being. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, the darkness concealing unseen eyes that followed my every move. Suddenly, the carriage shuddered violently, throwing me off balance and sending me sprawling to the floor. My flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as shadows danced and twisted in the peripheral corners of my vision. Panic surged through me as the temperature plummeted further, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the cold gnawed at my flesh. Then, out of the darkness, a figure materialized, a translucent apparition standing at the far end of the carriage. His form was indistinct, a vague outline that shimmered and shifted with an ethereal light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as the ghostly presence began to move towards me with deliberate slowness. "Why are you here?" the apparition whispered, its voice a hollow echo that resonated with a sorrowful resonance. I tried to speak, but no sound came forth, my throat constricted by fear. The figure extended a spectral hand, its finger pointing towards the back of the carriage where the doors had vanished without a trace. "Leave, now." Desperate to escape, I stumbled backwards, the apparition advancing with each step. The carriage began to tilt, the floor sloping steeply downward as the train accelerated into darkness. The emergency lights flickered violently, casting the space into a disorienting maze of light and shadow. The walls seemed to stretch and warp, the hum of the engine morphing into a cacophony of distorted whispers that filled my mind with torment. As the train hurtled through the void, the apparition reached out, its hand grazing my shoulder with an icy touch that sent waves of pain through my body. "You don't belong here," it murmured, the words etched into my consciousness like a painful mantra. With every ounce of strength, I pushed against the invisible force that held me captive, the sensation akin to being submerged in an endless abyss. The carriage spiraled into chaos, the walls pulsating with a sinister energy that threatened to consume me. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, drowning out any semblance of sanity I clung to. In a final, desperate attempt to break free, I lunged towards the apparition, my hand passing through its spectral form like smoke. The carriage jolted violently, the train screeching as it collided with an unseen barrier. The impact sent me flying, my body slamming against the floor as the carriage exploded into a whirlwind of light and darkness. I awoke abruptly, gasping for breath, my heart racing as the memory of the encounter lingered like a persistent nightmare. The carriage was empty, the emergency lanterns flickering softly in the aftermath of the chaos. The train had vanished, leaving me alone on the platform once more, the oppressive silence now filled with the distant echoes of my own fear. I stumbled out of the station, the cool night air a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness I had left behind. The streets of Stockholm were quiet, the city bathed in the pale light of the moon, I glanced back towards the platform, half expecting to see Silver Pylon reappear. But the tracks were empty, the memory of the ghostly train fading like a distant dream. Days turned into weeks as I tried to rationalize the experience, attributing it to exhaustion, stress, or perhaps an overactive imagination fueled by the local legends. But the nightmares persisted, the whispers of Silver Pylon echoing through my dreams, a constant reminder of the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. I delved deeper into the history of the Silver Pylon, uncovering accounts of previous sightings and unexplained disappearances that seemed to cluster around the train's elusive appearances. The more I learned, the more the lines between fact and fiction blurred, the mystery of Silver Pylon deepening into an enigma that defied understanding. One evening, driven by a combination of fear and obsession, I returned to Globin Station, determined to confront the legend that had consumed my every waking moment. The platform was deserted, the air thick with anticipation as I waited for the stroke of midnight. Hours passed with no sign of the ghostly train, the silence oppressive and unnerving. Just as doubt began to gnaw at me, a familiar vibration coursed through the ground, the low hum of an engine resonating through the empty station. My heart leaped as Silver Pylon materialized once more, its silver exterior gleaming under the station's dim lights. The doors slid open silently, inviting me into the unknown. I stepped onto the platform, the gap between the train and the edge narrowing with each hesitant step. As I reached the threshold, the doors closed behind me, sealing me inside the carriage once more. The oppressive darkness greeted me, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken dread. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam piercing the gloom and revealing the empty seats that stretched into infinity. As I moved down the aisle, the silence was deafening, broken only by the distant echo of my own footsteps. The train seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, the walls vibrating with a low, resonant hum that thrummed through my very being. The feeling of being watched intensified, the shadows concealing unseen eyes that followed my every move. Suddenly, the carriage shuddered violently, throwing me off balance and sending me sprawling to the floor. My flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as shadows danced and twisted in the peripheral corners of my vision. Panic surged through me as Silver Pylon accelerated into the void once more, the train disappearing into the darkness as abruptly as it had appeared. I awoke again, gasping for breath, the memory of Silver Pylon's presence lingering like a persistent specter. The carriage was empty, the emergency lanterns dimly glowing in the aftermath of the encounter. The train had vanished, leaving me alone on the platform once more, the oppressive silence now filled with the distant echoes of my own fear. I stumbled out of the station, the cool night air a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness I had left behind. The streets of Stockholm were quiet, the city bathed in the pale light of the moon. I glanced back towards the platform, half expecting to see Silver Pylon reappear. But the tracks were empty, the memory of the ghostly train fading like a distant dream. Days turned into weeks as I grappled with the reality of my experiences, the line between the tangible and the supernatural blurring into obscurity. The nightmares persisted, the whispers of Silver Pylon echoing through my dreams, a constant reminder of the thin veil between reality and the unknown. In my quest to understand, I uncovered more about the history of Silver Pylon, a train shrouded in mystery, its origins and purpose lost to time. Some believed it was a relic of a bygone era, a forgotten experiment in rapid transit that had been abandoned and left to drift through the subterranean tunnels. Others whispered of darker explanations, tales of ghostly apparitions and supernatural forces that sought to protect the secrets of the underground. I realized that Silver Pylon was more than just a train. It was a conduit between worlds, a vessel for lost souls who remained trapped in the perpetual darkness of the subway tunnels. Their whispers were a plea for release, a desperate attempt to communicate with the living and reclaim their lost lives. Driven by a mixture of fear and determination, I made peace with the haunting presence of Silver Pylon, accepting that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. The train had become a part of my reality. Its ghostly presence a constant reminder of the thin line between the known and the unknown. Years have passed since that night on Globen Station. But the memories of Silverpylon remain etched into my very being. On cold, silent nights, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the whispers of those lost souls, calling out from the depths of the subway tunnels. Their voices blend with the rustling pines and the distant hum of the city, a haunting symphony that never truly fades. I often find myself staring into the darkness, wondering if the spirits of Silverpylon have found peace or remain trapped in their eternal vigil. The train stands as a monument to their suffering, its silver exterior forever gleaming under the ghostly lights of the Stockholm subway. The shadows of Silverpylon continue to dance in my dreams, their faces twisted in eternal sorrow, their voices a reminder of the thin line between reality and nightmare, hope and despair. In sharing this story, I hope to honor those who were lost, to give voice to their silent screams that still echo through the underground tunnels. Let it serve as a cautionary tale to those who dare to delve into the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our control. For in the heart of the storm, amidst the swirling shadows and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully understood or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the night is thick with silence, I remember the shadows of Silverpylon. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. Silverpylon may drift aimlessly through the tunnels of Stockholm, but its legacy endures, a chilling reminder of the night when humanity's curiosity met the subway's unforgiving wrath, creating a tale of horror that will never fade. Story number 7. Echoes of Marylebone Street. I still wake up drenched in sweat, the remnants of that night clinging to my skin like the cold breath of the tunnels beneath Brooklyn. It's been over a century since the Marylebone Street wreck. Yet the memories haunt me with the same intensity as the screams that echo through the darkness every midnight. Tonight, as I sit alone in my study, the shadows cast by the flickering lamp dance eerily on the walls, and I can almost hear the cries of those lost souls, trapped forever in the abyss of the subway tunnels. I was just a teenager when it happened, a time when the city was bustling with energy and promise. The subway was the lifeblood of Brooklyn, a network of steel veins pumping people to and fro, unaware of the tragedy that would unfold one fateful evening. I remember that night vividly, the rain pounding against the windows, the flickering lights casting long, wavering shadows, and the palpable tension in the air as the last train of the night prepared to depart. Brandon was my best friend, a spirited young man with dreams bigger than the city itself. We had spent countless hours exploring the underbelly of Brooklyn, fascinated by the labyrinthine tunnels and the secrets they held. That night, we decided to take one last ride, a spontaneous adventure to see the abandoned stations whispered about in our youth. Little did we know, our curiosity would lead us into the heart of darkness. The train was old, its wooden cars creaking with every movement, the smell of oil and dampness thick in the air. We found ourselves seated near the back, the windows fogged from the cold outside. The conductor, a stern man with a weathered face, glanced at us with a hint of disapproval but said nothing as he focused on his duties. As the train rumbled forward, the lights flickered intermittently, casting unsettling shadows that danced along the walls. Halfway through the journey, the train began to slow unexpectedly. The lights dimmed further, and a sense of unease settled over us. Brandon leaned closer, his eyes wide with concern. "Something's wrong," he whispered. Before I could respond, the train jolted violently, the screech of metal against metal filling the air. The car lurched to a halt, throwing us against the seats with brutal force. Panic erupted among the passengers as the realization set in. We were stuck, stranded in the darkness beneath the city. The conductor tried to maintain order, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Stay calm, everyone. We'll get through this." But his words did little to quell the rising fear. As minutes turned into hours, the situation grew dire, the temperature plummeted, and the air became thick with a sense of impending doom. Brandon and I decided to investigate, hoping to find a way to restart the train or at least communicate with the outside world. We navigated the dimly lit corridors, our flashlights casting long, wavering beams that seemed to move of their own accord. The tunnels felt alive, the walls pulsating with an unseen energy. As we approached the engine room, the whispers began, a soft, indistinct murmur that grew louder with each step we took. It was as if the very tunnels were trying to communicate, their voices filled with sorrow and despair. Suddenly, the door to the engine room slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw shadows moving just beyond the reach of the light. "Brandon, we need to get out of here," I urged, my voice trembling. But Brandon was rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on something unseen. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The whispers had transformed into anguished cries, the sound of countless souls trapped in eternal torment. I reached out to him, but he recoiled, his face contorted in fear. "Something's here," he muttered, backing away from the door. A chill ran down my spine as the temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the cold air. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, forming words that sent shivers down my spine. "Leave, now." Panic surged through me as I grabbed Brandon's arm, pulling him towards the door. But as we tried to move, invisible forces seemed to hold us in place, the shadows pressing in around us. The cries turned into screams, their voices blending into a cacophony of anguish that threatened to overwhelm my senses. In a desperate bid for freedom, I pushed against the door, the force of my anger breaking through the invisible restraints. The door swung open, revealing a tunnel bathed in an unnatural, otherworldly light. Without hesitation, I dragged Brandon through, the screams fading behind us as we fled deeper into the maze of tunnels. We stumbled through the darkness, the whispers now a distant echo, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on our souls. Hours passed as we navigated the labyrinth, the exit nowhere in sight. Exhausted and broken, we collapsed onto the cold, damp ground, our bodies numb from the relentless cold. As dawn broke, the storm outside subsided, and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the tunnel walls. The air grew warmer, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, leaving us shaken but alive. We made our way back to the train, the conductor's worried face greeting us as we emerged from the shadows. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lies beneath the surface of our bustling city. The Malbone Street wreck became a legend, a story of lost souls and unexplained phenomena that still echoes through the corridors of time. People spoke of the vanished passengers, their cries still heard on quiet nights, a chilling testament to the mysteries that remain unsolved. Years later, I still find myself drawn to the remnants of that tragic night, the echoes of the lost souls a constant presence in my mind. On stormy evenings, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear their whispers, a haunting lullaby that calls out from the depths of the subway tunnels. The shadows of Malbone Street continue to dance in my dreams, their faces twisted in eternal sorrow, their voices a reminder of the thin line between life and death, hope and despair. In sharing this story, I hope to honor those who were lost, to give voice to their silent screams that still resonate through the darkness. Let it serve as a cautionary tale to those who dare to delve into the unknown, to respect the forces that lie beyond our understanding. For in the heart of the storm, amidst the swirling shadows and restless spirits, lies a darkness that can never be fully comprehended or escaped. And so, when the winds howl and the rain lashes against my windows, I remember the echoes of Malbone Street. I remember the faces of those we lost, their eyes filled with fear and sorrow, and I understand that some tragedies leave scars that time cannot heal, and some spirits never find the peace they so desperately seek. The Marylebone Street wreck may remain a haunting chapter in history, but its legacy endures. A chilling reminder of the night when humanity's quest for connection met the unforgiving wrath of the unknown, creating a tale of horror that will never fade.